and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 9th episode, our guest is Benjamin Fowler. Fowler has been playing the drums since he was 12, and teaching since the age of 17. He graduated from the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in jazz studies and percussion. At school, he studied with Los Angeles studio stalwart Steve Houghton. He also had lessons with veteran New Orleans drummer John Vidacovich and studied regularly with Indianapolis jazz and gospel great Charleston Deno Sanders. Over the years, Fowler has played the drums in such bands as Community Currency, The Delicious of Joyful Noise Records, Kentucky Nightmare of Standard Recording, DM Stith of Asthmatic Kitty, and Cardboard. He is currently busy with the Jefferson Street Parade Band and Chainsaw Mondays. Along with the drum set, Fowler also teaches fingerpicking, rock, and jazz guitar and piano at the Jefferson Street Music Studio. Fowler coordinates several teachers. They're all currently active in Bloomington's musical community, and they teach a variety of instruments including trumpet, saxophone, keyboard, banjo, mandolin, vocals, and more. Whatever you'd like to learn, the experts at JSMS can help. Ben is the founder of the Limestone Beaters. The group began in June 2012 as Bloomington's only independent student drumline. In the summer of 2014, Aaron Comforti joined as co-director, and the group blossomed into a full-on student brass band. They just recorded their first full-length album at the end of April. The Jefferson Street Parade Band can be found on Facebook at Jefferson ST Parade Band, all one word. The official website for Chainsaw Mondays is chainsawmondays.com, and their Facebook page can be found at Chainsaw Mondays, all one word. The Limestone Beaters can be found on Facebook at Limestone Beaters, all one word. The Jefferson Street Music Studio can be found by searching the name on Facebook. The studio can be reached by phone at 812-340-9247 or 812-269-6171. The street address is 2051 West Vernal Pike, Bloomington, Indiana, 47404. I've compiled a playlist of songs from the Limestone Beaters, the Jefferson Street Parade Band, and Chainsaw Mondays. It can be found on the show's YouTube page, which can be found at tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show YouTube, all one word. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes at tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show. Once you're signed into iTunes, hit subscribe. Click the tab on the iTunes page near the top that says Ratings and Reviews. From there, please leave a star rating, hopefully 5 stars, and click Write a Review to leave a review. Thanks again for the support. You can now also find The Rob Burgess Show on Stitcher at stitcher.com/the-rob-burgess-show. Google Play Music at tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show Google Play. Tune in at tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show Tune In. You can also subscribe directly to the RSS feed at tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show RSS. If you're an Android user and you're still not sure how to listen, you can also visit the website subscribeonandroid.com/tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show RSS. And if you have a one-click supported app on your Android device, the app will load automatically. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. The official website for The Rob Burgess Show is www.therobburgessshow.com. Follow on Twitter at Rob Burgess Show. like the page on Facebook at The Rob Burgess Show, follow on SoundCloud at The-Rob-Burgess-Show. The email for the show is therobburgesshow@gmail.com. And now, on to the show.
Hello.
Hey, Ben, it's Rob.
Hey, Rob. How you doing this morning?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right.
Cool.
Doing all right here.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah.
So, just go ahead and tell people a little bit about yourself. Just going to start off with here.
Right on. Well, so my name's Ben Fowler, and I am an active musician around Bloomington, Indiana here. I direct the Jefferson Street Parade Band, and I've played in several rock bands over the years, and I'm currently making my living teaching music lessons. I've been teaching drum lessons and guitar and piano for about 13 or 14 years now, and I just started my own teaching studio called the Jefferson Street Music Studio. We started our first lessons here about 3 days ago at the start of May.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. And we should say, for people that haven't already figured it out, you're the brother of Jonathan, my former roommate, and podcast guest number 2. So if people want to go back and listen to that one, we just need to get you guys' dad on now, and we'll have the trifecta of the Fowler men.
There we go.
But I've been a fan of your music for a long time, going back all the way to Cardboard, of course.
Awesome.
Yeah. So how did you get started with music? I guess I remember Jonathan saying something about was it an antique sign that got sold that was that bought your first drum set? Am I remembering that right?
That was how I got a hold of my second drum set.
Oh, okay. So you had a drum set prior to that. Okay.
Yeah, my mom and I split the cost of a kind of a beginner drum set back when I was about 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
In the summer when we had first moved to I guess it was the summer of '97 when we had first moved to Indiana from North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Moved to Mitchell, Indiana, and I had a pair of drumsticks for a couple of years, and really felt like I wanted to dig in and get started learning the drum set, and so we split the cost of some beginner drums, and but yeah, there's a pretty good story of that enamel sign. There was let's see. We were remodeling a building down on this land in Mitchell to live in, turning an old barn into a new house, basically. And my parents found some nice-looking French doors at a yard sale or something in Mitchell, and because French doors have a bunch of little panes of glass, they had the people that were selling them or storing them before that had basically taken this old enamel sign and painted it black and nailed it across locked it onto the doors to protect the glass while it was just in storage in their barn for a while. Mm-hmm. And so the sign came with the doors, and I went to the trouble of cleaning the paint off, and it turned out that it was I think a BF Goodrich tire sign from years and years ago. It was an old enamel sign. Mm-hmm. And I ended up meeting some folks in Bedford who would list things on eBay for people, mm-hmm. and for a cut of the sale or whatever. And they ended up listing that enamel sign and managing to sell it for $500.
Wow.
And I used that money to buy a really awesome old Thomas Swing Star drum set. It was like a 7-piece drum set, big old monstrous kit from back in the 80s.
Right. Yeah, and that Mitchell property had some interesting things on it too, because I remember when your mom was saying that she dismantled what they were dismantling, that log cabin or whatever that was on the land, and there was like some newspapers from like when Lincoln was assassinated that apparently just disintegrated as soon as they touched the air or something.
Yeah, I remember that. There was an old log cabin on that land that was built in the 1860s, and it was poplar logs, and I guess on the interior of the logs, before there's a layer of almost like a stucco kind of thing oftentimes, and then wallpaper on top of that. And the layer below the wallpaper was basically layered with newspaper, I don't know if it was just to bind it all together or just to kind of to finish and hold the mortar in place. And we could read some of the newspaper as we were taking that apart back when I was a kid. And the cabin went up in the 1860s, and there was an Indiana newspaper article about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Plastered into the wall there.
Like it was just another piece of paper just to throw in there, not like a historical document or whatever.
Right. Just throw it into the wall, no problem.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
So, well, that's cool, man. So, was the drums the first thing you wanted to learn? Did you learn how to play guitar around that time, or what was the order?
Drums were my first thing. I definitely started strumming around on an acoustic guitar maybe a couple years after that. Never quite with the focus or the determination that I approached the drums with, for whatever reason. I do still really enjoy playing the guitar and working on it and trying to gain ground on it as I go. But the drums really grabbed me. I remember, once I got that drum set, at first I really couldn't make heads or tails of it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I loved to kind of tap along and play along with music that I liked, but I had no idea how to play a rock beat. I would just kind of play eighth notes along on a snare drum, or before I had the kit, I would just, play along with CDs on like pillows and chairs and things. And I really didn't know how to translate it to actually playing what people were doing in songs. So there was a period of time in that winter after we got those drums that I kind of just hung it up and said, forget it. This is too frustrating. I don't know what I'm doing. And then that next spring, I remember getting online and finding some kind of website that was along the lines of like, Jim's first drum lesson right here for you on the internet, and
right.
And it was like a written basic rock beat, kind of like a boom chick bop chick kind of a groove, and it pointed out which hand was supposed to do what your foot was supposed to do and when, and how to read it, and then it had a little clip of what it should sound like, and it also listed a bunch of songs that had that groove in it, and that was really eye-opening for me. Like, that's how I started figuring out what was going on with drumming in all these, all the rock songs I was listening to. Is just that kind of was the key that opened the door, you know what I mean? And then I started hearing that beat everywhere and hearing little variations of it everywhere and trying to learn those variations. And later that summer I started taking lessons and kind of really dug in from that point onward.
Okay, cool. Do you find that since you did the drums first and then moved into guitar and things like that, do you find that it's helped your guitar playing? Because I know for me, for example, I play guitar since I was 12. Not great, but I do. And I find that one of the harder things that I have to work on is when the strumming pattern of the guitar is on a different, I don't know if it's a different beat or a different syncopate, I don't know what the word is, but it's different than the singing. Like, I feel like that's a really hard thing for me to overcome. Did you feel like that helped you at all when you came time for the guitar?
I think that people who start out on the drums often have, I guess any instrument that you start with kind of lends certain advantages to other instruments that you try to learn. I think there's a general truth to that. I think that people who play the drum set basically have to get good at doing several things at once rhythmically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that certainly makes it easier to learn some songs on the guitar where the strumming pattern is different from the vocal rhythm. Not to say that it's always totally easy, but it's a skill that drummers develop. So it's like a skill that has helped. Lately, I've been learning some Red Hot Chili Peppers songs on the guitar and playing some of those songs with my students. And it's always striking, like learning songs by bands who have a different singer than, like the singer does not play the guitar, for example.
Right.
Oftentimes, no one is having to juggle that, in the original recording. No one is having to do that live in their band. So I'll be trying to play a Chili Peppers song, and the vocal rhythm is just totally whacked out, and the guitar rhythm is also totally whacked out, and it's really something, I tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Anthony Kiedis and whoever they got playing guitar at the time are definitely two different people. So.
Indeed.
But yeah,
and it's John Frusciante. That's the guy whose guitar playing really grabs me from various eras.
Right.
He really said some stuff on that instrument.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. Now, so Cardboard was, I guess, your first band, right? Did you have anything before that?
That was the first.
That was the first. Yeah. And how old were you when you guys started playing together?
14.
Wow. Okay. And were you guys all kind of in the same place musically, as far as like your instruments and knowing things like that? Did you kind of learn kind of together?
I think we definitely learned a lot together. We all started out, with the ability to play some songs, stuff that we had learned on our own. We kind of brought together and we would show each other. I remember David Woodruff playing a couple of Weezer songs and a couple of Nirvana songs that he had learned, and I was trying to play along with like the Who and Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff, and initially when we started, it was we I guess our first bass player was Andrew Chesterfield, I think was his name, and he didn't stick around too long. There was another guy early on in the band named Ben Graves, and he and David had been playing music kind of before I joined up, and we didn't overlap for very long. In fact, that classic Cardboard hit, Let's Go Egg Ben's House, is actually written for Ben Graves. I think there's a common misconception that's about my house.
I always thought that was your house, and I was like, why are they egging the house of somebody that's already in the band? It seems counterintuitive.
Why would he consent to play drums in this song?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it really raised a lot of questions for people. But we're here to crack open the myths today.
That's right.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So so I got to know your music that way. I definitely went to a few Cardboard shows there. What did you guys? What were your main? You mentioned a few influences there, but were you guys always playing your own songs, or were you playing covers together, or was it always that way that you guys wanted to do your own stuff?
We definitely tried playing some covers, and it was often just pretty unsatisfying for whatever reason. We would practice once a week once we got the ball rolling, and pretty early on we got excited about writing our own songs. I think we pushed David pretty hard to write songs and to sing, even when he was not necessarily feeling like, okay, here's a great song I've written. It was just kind of like, let's play, let's get some stuff done so that we can get out and play. And we all dove into it pretty quick like that. I think we covered a Red Hot Chili Peppers song. We covered, once Graham Campbell was playing guitar in the band, later that freshman year, we covered Purple Haze for a little while. We covered...
well, you guys played Fire, right, too? Wasn't that one of the ones you covered?
We did. We played Fire. We also did a really awesome Radiohead song called Just, that's off of... I think it's off of their second album, one of their earlier, more rockin' albums.
Right.
But yeah, like we played several of these songs, but they would oftentimes end up being kind of the weakest part of the gig. So we would quit. We would quit with the covers and just try to work on our own stuff more often.
Right. Well, it's easy when you're that age to kind of just emulate things because you don't really know anything else. So I think it is kind of cool. I always thought it was cool that you guys kind of went out on a limb and decided to do your own stuff. Because I mean, heck, I was in a couple bands and all we did was covers, and we didn't really ever stick our necks out there like that. So I was always impressed that you guys just went right into it, and didn't rely on people's pre-knowledge of the songs to get you through. So. But you guys had, how many albums did you guys eventually have? Was it 2?
We recorded 2 CDs. That's
okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I've got those somewhere still saved on the thing here. I probably burned a copy of those like 10 years ago. So they're in the Rob Burgess archive somewhere. So.
Yeah, last time I caught up with you up in north of Indy there, you gave me a copy, which is why I still have them.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, there was some definite hits on there. I'm trying to remember the names of some of them, but what was it? El Rego was that one
El
of the
Rego
ones?
was one of the few that Graham played trumpet on. That was a real catchy song.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, what was the other one? There was another trumpet song. It was on the second album, I believe.
There's another one there's one called Rest Your Head. That was, yeah. We were leaning on our ska roots, that's for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I detected some Cake influence there, too. So.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that Cake album, Fashion Nugget,
oh, yeah,
was a pretty good listen back in those days. Yeah. I definitely enjoyed that CD.
Absolutely, same here, for sure. So you guys lasted for how long? You guys went through all the way through high school, right? And then you guys all kind of went your separate ways kind of after high school, is that right?
Yeah, I think the next year after high school we played a handful of shows. David went to school. Our front man, David Woodruff, went to school out in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So we played some shows over spring break and over winter break, and maybe a little bit that next summer. But after that, it was about the end of things. Mm-hmm. And that group David and I, when he did move back to Bloomington a couple of years into college, mm-hmm. he and I, and Julian Bransby, and eventually Matt Romey, and then eventually Nick Romey, got another group going called The Delicious. Mm-hmm. And I think Cardboard played for 4 or 5 years, and The Delicious also played for 4 or 5 years following mm-hmm. that.
Right, yeah, and I definitely went to a few of those shows as well. Did you guys had at least one CD that I remember, right?
Yeah, we had a full-length CD and mm-hmm. also an EP that we released after that.
Right. What would you say the differences musically between the two groups? I mean, there was obviously the overlap of you and David, but what was the kind of progression as far as what you were interested in playing?
Well, I guess Cardboard was our first go at it, and it was kind of influenced by everything that we'd been listening to in our lives up to that point, and it was just our first bunch of tries at writing songs and coming up with riffs and coming up with beats and seeing where we could take them. And I guess The Delicious was just maybe a little more, I don't know, maybe a little more in the indie rock vein in a certain sense. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think what some of the biggest influences were when we were getting that band started. Maybe the Walkmen and the Strokes and the Shins and Modest Mouse and Spoon and I'm sure lots of others, but those were some bands that we were getting to see live around that time and that were having an impact on us.
Right.
But it was good to just start over after a certain point, although it's the same drummer and the same front man. It was good to just reimagine the whole thing for a while and see where we could go with it, starting over there.
Right. Now, at what point did, I'm trying to remember, you've been in so many bands and sometimes multiple ones at the same time, the hardest working man in show business on the line here, but now you were in Kentucky Nightmare at the same time, or was that after?
That was roughly the same time as The Delicious.
Okay.
There's a lot of overlap of those years.
Right.
Kentucky Nightmare started when I was probably 19 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time it was a trio. It was Simon Moore on guitar and vocals and principal songwriter, and then Evan Farrell was playing bass with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for a year or year and a half. We recorded a CD called There's Vampires in Them Hills in my basement.
Nice.
And then Evan ended up getting a gig with a band out of California called Rogue Wave. And he moved out there and got to do a lot of touring, and we kind of put the band on the back burner for a while, and eventually it took flight once again with my perennial bandmate David Woodruff on lead guitar, and with Karen Jensen playing bass.
Okay.
And that was a really excellent incarnation. We made our second album with that lineup and did some touring with that lineup and so forth.
Right, and I always thought that was a great band name and also a great album title. It has a lot of evocative imagery there. So.
Heck yeah.
So were any of you from Kentucky, or where did the name come from exactly?
Karen and Simon were from Tennessee.
Okay.
They grew up around Nashville area.
Uh-huh.
And David's from Indiana. And
right.
Originally is from North Carolina.
Sure.
Evan Farrell is originally from Vermont, I believe. So no, none of us are from Kentucky. It's a Space Ghost Coast to Coast reference.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. There's I believe it's in reference to an imaginary business or corporation that's like I really don't remember. Something along the lines of the Kentucky Nightmare Talk Show Whiskey Corporation or something like that. So you'll have to do your own research on that.
Yeah, I have the computer in front of me, and you can maybe hear me clicking around. So that was during college as well, when you were at IU, right? So that was when you were. How
That's
old
correct.
were you? Would you say?
I was in that band from the time I was 19 or 20 until I was probably 23 or 24, something like that.
And does that bring us to the parade band, or was there other bands in between? I felt like you were kind of a contract drummer or somebody that was kind of filling in for people kind of here and there in the meantime. Is that correct?
There was one pretty awesome opportunity that I received as a hired gun right after, let's see, maybe 1 year after I was done with college. I got hired in the spring of 2009 to play drums with an artist called Stith. He was really a guy named David Stith who had recorded his first album pretty much by himself. Not entirely, but he had done a lot of multi-tracking and overdubbing of keyboards and vocals and guitar and all kinds of found sound derived percussion, and made this really beautiful album. And then he was getting some buzz over in Europe at that time, and needed to put a band together to go play his songs on the road. And I got hired to go to Europe for 3 weeks and tour around with Stith, and we went to Berlin and then flew down to Milan and played in Milan and Rome and Bologna, and then we flew to Belgium, played a couple days in the Netherlands and Belgium and France, and then we took a ferry to England and played a couple days in England. Then we went back to France, and then we went back to England, and then we went to Ireland and played a couple of days up in Ireland, and getting paid,
right.
Getting paid to play drums in Europe. It was really amazing.
Well, that's awesome. Now, what are the differences as far as being a, like you said, hired gun as opposed to somebody that obviously has a creative control over the band? Is it relaxing that you're just kind of there because it's a job, or is it kind of frustrating because you wish you could have more input, or how does that work?
Well, that particular gig was a pretty cool blend of both. I actually was able to have quite a lot of creative control. In fact, I'd gone to school and studied the drum set and studied jazz drum set at IU, and I guess there comes a point where you get nice to change it up, and I wasn't quite feeling playing the drum set with the DM Stith songs, and I ended up coming up with a really jumbled up, strange little percussion rig that where I was like wearing a bass drum on some guitar straps, and then I had a lot of other accessories kind of on all sides of me around that, and I played sometimes with sticks, sometimes with mallets, had shakers strapped to my feet and all kinds of fun stuff. And there was a lot of creative control is what I'm getting at. I was able to wing it and let the show really develop, like over the course of the 3-week tour. Actually, over the course of that tour, the lineup changed. Like we had various musicians that couldn't be there right at the beginning of the trip who joined in, this woman named Maria who played the cello on that tour joined us maybe 2 days in Milan, and she was late because she was playing with David Byrne in New York City like the night before.
Wow.
That's a really great reason to not be able to go to Europe yet,
Yeah.
So she was playing cello. Maria Jeffers is her name. And then this woman, Marla Hansen, who lives in Berlin with her partner Christian, she was touring with us playing viola. On the first few gigs, Christian played some clarinet and some saxophone with us, and then he stayed in Berlin. So we lost the reed instrument, but we got the cello added in, and then a couple of days after that, our bass player, Mike Dixon, joined us in Belgium, and stayed with us for the remainder of the trip. So not only was my percussion rig continually developing, and not only were my parts developing, but the band kept growing the whole time too. And I really think that David Stith is a unique frontman in how much freedom he's willing to work with within his band. I think being a hired gun in a pop group is typically a lot more regimented than what we did. We would schedule rehearsals at like rental rehearsal spaces in Europe along the way, and just like hash out more sections of songs and figure out new ways of doing things as we went, and it just kept getting a bit more effective and beautiful the whole way, which I thought was a really unique experience to get to have.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like there's two kinds of band leaders like that. It seems like there's people like what you're describing, and then I was kind of thinking of maybe more like the James Brown Prince model of, regimented, I'm going to fine you or inflict some kind of pain on you if you don't get in line and act like you're supposed to or look like you're supposed to or whatever.
Right, here's exactly what I want, and I know what I want, and and you better do it, and you better do it well, right?
I can replace you tomorrow with 50 other people or whatever. Kind of thing. Yeah. But that's cool. Yeah, right. Now, is that something you'd ever consider doing again? I mean, was that something that he left the possibility of you coming back and doing, or how did that end up?
It ended up, we went back to Europe one more time that summer and played some shows in England, played a couple of festivals, and then we played a couple of shows in New York City that fall, and it seems like part of his MO is just to keep changing it up. And in terms of any kind of work together, I haven't heard from him since then, which is fine. I know he's still doing his thing. He's still out there making a bunch of music. Maybe he lives down in Austin, Texas now, or I know if he was for a while, and then I think he's been back in New York State somewhere. And our paths have not crossed. It would be cool if they do again sometime. Who knows?
Right. Well, I guess as just a music fan mostly, I just kind of maybe romanticize things like that, and I always think, and I kind of do the same thing with people that work on TV shows or movies together. I just assume that, oh man, they must be, hanging out all the time, and really it's it's fun and you're playing music, but it is a job, you know what I mean? And you are working together, and it is kind of weird to think, some of the things about like the Rolling Stones, for example, have known each other since they were 14 years old, and it's like, can you imagine working for 60 years with somebody you knew when you were 14 years old? It's kind of crazy, but I mean, this is incredible. As much of a job as it is a fun recreation as it is anything, you know what I mean? So
yeah, it has both sides. It's like it's on some kind of a sliding scale between it being, a totally dry day job, and on the other end of the spectrum being like a completely free creative outlet, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Every band finds itself somewhere on that spectrum.
Right.
If you want to think of it that way. You don't have to, but it's one way to look at it.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the parade band, when did that form, and when was there any other bands I'm missing in between that start of that and the end of kind of what you're describing?
Another group that I played with maybe starting freshman year of college is called The Names.
Okay.
Did you ever catch that? I
feel like maybe I saw at least one show. That sounds very familiar. This was in, you guys played around Bloomington, right?
We did, yeah. We played Bloomington, and then occasionally we went down to Nashville, Tennessee a couple of times.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw at least one show of that. Was that Karen Jensen also in that band?
Yeah, that's how I met Karen. And Nick Sinix and a guy named Preston Garrett.
Okay, I definitely saw that band then, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that group played for 2 or 3 years during college, and another rockin' indie rock type of affair. but yeah, I suppose to get to the parade band, since that is kind of my main thing now, the way that the Jefferson Street Parade Band got started was, I guess, in the winter of 2008, 2009. After I'd finished college that previous spring, I was definitely missing playing music with horn players. That had been a real perk of the music school experience, was being in jazz combos and Latin ensembles and big bands and so forth with some really good horn players. And so I had also, that same summer, I had gotten to do a fair amount of touring with Kentucky Nightmare and the Delicious, and I had played drums on a cruise ship for a stretch of time that summer. And I guess through the course of all those experiences, I got pretty tired of playing for audiences who maybe weren't really that tuned into the music. Mm-hmm. It's like I was really proud of all the rock bands that I played in over the years, really proud of the music we were writing and, the level we were performing at. But, you go to a lot of trouble to book a tour yourself and to get a van and get out and work every night that way. But a lot of bars we would end up at, there might be 10 people there. There might be 3 people there. Sometimes, certainly some exceptions. There were some really amazing nights on those trips, but it got pretty repetitive where there would be these gigs, where people cared a lot more about what they're going to drink next or, whatever their own MO was for the evening. And you're just over there in the corner pouring your heart out, but nobody's being particularly moved by it. And, it's a heck of a lot of energy for it to not really move people, like mm-hmm. What's the point of this after a while?
Right.
And we have our recordings that we're proud of and this and that, but if the live show is not gripping, if it's not really doing anything for people, then it started to feel like not what I wanted to be doing so much of, not what I wanted to be putting so much energy into. So anyway, back in the winter of 2008, 2009, I was missing playing with horn players, and I was tired of playing kind of in this genre where in rock and roll, it's like enough has become predictable mm-hmm. that it is pretty hard to freak people out anymore, Mm-hmm. So I had this idea one day while I was waiting tables. Wouldn't it be fun to put together like a parade band where we could play music outside with a bunch of drums and a bunch of horn players and really catch people off guard, put on a show where they're not expecting it and so forth, and see what happens, see what kind of experiences we can elicit in the process.
Right. So now I assume you weren't in any kind of marching band in your younger days, right?
I did 1 year of high school marching band at Bloomington South.
Ah, okay.
And it did me a lot of good. My chops got better on the drums, and I got a better sense of rhythm for mm-hmm. sure from that experience. But at that time, I was all about playing rock and roll, and I wasn't I wasn't so excited about the time commitment involved in the marching band, so I just did 1 year of it and left it at that. I didn't play in any marching band in college or anything.
Right. Yeah, see, I was in just regular band in junior high, and I played the trumpet. And, of course, when we get to high school, that's when the marching band kicks in, and then they bring out the uniforms, and it's like, I just want to play music, and now I have to wear this outfit and play for the football players. Yeah. It's like, so I only did 1 year of that, because that was, I was awkward enough at that age without having however you want to describe the marching band uniform.
Without the blue and gold tassels,
Yeah, without the plume on my head, I was already enough of a weirdo without that. I didn't really need any more attention drawn to myself.
Thanks, but no thanks. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. So 1 year of that was enough for me. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like this was more on your own terms, and you guys obviously have your own creative control. So you obviously were going to do some drumming on that. But what was the progression as far as you said you wanted to get some horns involved again? What other instruments were you kind of looking for when you were putting this together?
Well, initially we were, let's see. First thing I did was call, or I guess text, my friend Sophie Fott, who I had played some music with in college. She's a really excellent tenor saxophonist. And I just asked her if she would be interested in participating and being a part of this thing and see if it sounded like fun to her or not. And I didn't hear anything for a couple days, and finally she got back and said, yeah, let's see what happens. Let's put some ideas together. And part of the inspiration early on was, a big part of the inspiration was definitely West African percussion traditions. I was listening a lot to this drummer named Famadou Konate, who's from Guinea. I had first heard his music when I was about 18 down in North Carolina. This guy, Andrew Moore, who was working for my dad doing construction at the time, had studied with Famadou a couple of times and showed me some of his recordings, and I got to sit in on some West African drum and dance classes that happen in Asheville a couple times a week while I was down there in the summer. And it's just a completely different rhythmic sense and rhythmic style of composition that's happening and has been happening for a lot of centuries, presumably, in West Africa. Mm-hmm. And it really cracked my head open as to some different ways to think about rhythm and to compose rhythm. So in getting the parade band started, we basically strapped together some, random drums and accessories, drums and cowbells that were lying around my basement from parts of drum sets that weren't being used, and started learning some of Famadou's songs and started kind of writing rhythms in that style. And Sophie rounded up 2 or 3 horn players. There was a guy named Jake Handelman who played trombone, and a guy named Matt Nowlin who played trumpet with us for a while. Mm-hmm. And Anson Honey was playing drums, and Dan Morris was playing drums, and a guy named Evan Noyes was playing drums with us in those early months and years. That was kind of the first incarnation of the band. Mm-hmm. So there's the West African thing, and we also were definitely playing some Latin American music. There was a song from Cuba that we did, and a song from Colombia, and a song from actually a couple of Cuban songs, I suppose, that were part of it early on.
Right. So how many people would that be total? Lost count.
I think at the beginning it was about 7 of us, something like that.
And what is it currently?
Well, people ask me that, and I usually just pull an approximate number out of the air, because there's a certain amount of players who live elsewhere who will come out of the woodwork and join us when we go on tour, and a certain amount of flux to who's currently active in the group, but it's between 10 and 15 right now on a given gig usually. Mm-hmm.
So as far as I always wonder when bands have that many members, how it goes when you get paid. Is it like $5 for everybody? I mean, like with the Polyphonic Spree, when they go to play a gig, they might command a couple $1,000s, but by the time you get done splitting it between all 50 people, it's like
right. Nobody's getting rich.
Right, exactly. It's like, man, singer-songwriter's not sounding so bad right now.
Indeed, there's a division of the assets, that's for sure.
Gotcha.
But I will say the Jefferson Street Parade Band has the ability to get paid a lot more than almost any project that I've been a part of. So on the one hand, it gets divided, but on the other hand, we do get paid. You know, we can play a $600 gig,
right? And
the people paying for it will feel like they got their money's worth. We can pay $1,000 gig, and the people will feel like they got their money's worth. We're not always paying gigs like that, but they do come along.
Sure.
And it definitely is one of my MOs to keep the musicians involved well paid, you know, because they're a talented bunch, and they're working hard, learning complicated music and shedding it and playing at a high level, and so, you know, they deserve to get paid for it. So that's part of how I think that's part of what keeps it at a high level, is that musicians come to it knowing that they're going to get some work along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is your opinion on as far as you know, kind of downloading music? And it seems like the live show seems to be the main way that bands you know, are making money these days. Do you kind of just kind of write that off as far as a revenue stream, or is it just kind of like I imagine the recording is almost just a promotion for the live show at this point for a lot of bands that are looking to make a living at it.
Yeah, I think for the Jefferson Street Parade Band, we have a unique advantage of, when we busk, when we play out on the streets, we end up selling a lot of CDs, and, you know, there are different. I haven't studied the demographics of who streams and who downloads and who buys online, but presumably a lot of the people who are still buying CDs are a little older, and a lot of the people who are, you know, the Napster generation are not buying CDs.
Right.
There's Napster and Groove Shark and Spotify and YouTube and on down the line. All these ways of not paying for music that you hear. It just is what it is. I mean, there's no way around it at this day and age that a lot of music is listened to for free. It definitely still feels important to record albums and to sell them and to put videos on YouTube. All that stuff still feels like very legitimate ways to reach an audience and to have your music listened to. And I don't know. It's like back through the years, people were copying cassette tapes. People were, I guess, in the era of vinyl, there was a time when people couldn't copy each other's records and had to borrow or steal, I suppose.
Right.
But not too long after that, it got to where you could, you know, record a cassette tape off of someone else's vinyl. And, you know, where there's a will, there's a way.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I remember there was a Dead Kennedys album that they left the other side intentionally blank of the tape. The message was, home recording is killing music. We're trying to help by leaving the second side of this blank so you can record your own or something. It was pretty funny. I think people kind of in this day and age have to decide what creators they support and how they want to support them best, because like you said, it's kind of is what it is at this point, and you can't really put the genie back in the bottle or the toothpaste back in the tube or whatever metaphor you want to use.
Both good metaphors.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like people kind of just have to decide, you know, what artists do I want to support, and what, you know, which creators do I want to keep being able to make a living at creating, and kind of doing it that way. Yeah, like you said, it is what it is these days, you know. So
yeah, the other side of it, even if we were to put the genie back in the bottle, there's a huge amount of cash that gets scraped off the top back when that genie was in that bottle.
Yeah.
Of all the accountants and all the bureaucracy of the record labels where everybody was making a living, and the musicians weren't always, you know, usually weren't making a living, even as the ones creating the product.
Right.
So that whole paradigm of, you know, getting signed to a record label being a desirable thing, I feel like that there are still people still hold on to that, like musicians that I know who are my age or a little older, a lot of them still have that in their head, or they did 10 years ago. As wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be a huge validation or a huge goal realized or this or that? But it really wouldn't. It really wouldn't have been, is the answer. And
right.
It's really much better now in certain regards, because you can self-promote and you can home record to a really high level, and you can make your own art, and you can, be very self-directed about finding an audience for it. And you're not paying any accountants unless you want to. You're not carrying along some giant bureaucratic dinosaur in the process unless you somehow find some twisted way to do that of your own accord. That's not what's going on anymore.
Right.
With a few exceptions, there are artists on that level that are still carrying the weight of Warner Brothers on their songs or this or that, which is really, the songs are usually a bummer. It all, I don't know, just desserts or something.
Sure.
That's what it is. That's
yeah.
I'm not looking back. I don't know. Not
yeah.
about it.
Well, there's no use in looking back. You just kind of got to live in the reality that you're in or whatever. But it's funny you mentioned Warner. It's interesting seeing what's happened with Prince's back catalog here. My heart kind of sank when I heard they drilled his safe open. I was like, ugh, he went through this protracted fight with his record label, and he had Slave on his face for years, and he changed his name because they said they owned his name, and finally won back as all his masters, and then oops, doesn't have a will, or we can't find one, and now his body's barely cold or barely been cremated, and we're going to drill the safe that he had for years open. That made me feel a little icky or whatever, but
that is really something.
Yeah, for sure.
Got to jump on that post-mortem best of real quick.
Exactly.
Plan for it.
Right. Well, I was thinking about it though, and kind of with the proximity of David Bowie dying, David Bowie definitely had more of a sense, I felt like, that his time was coming to an end or whatever. And of course he put out that Black Star album. I don't know have you heard that yet?
Parts of it. I haven't heard the whole thing yet.
It's quite a listen or whatever, because you can definitely tell that he knew that his time was approaching. He's like, okay, I'm an artist. This is a big moment in my life, even though it's the end. I'm going to make a statement or whatever. And he definitely kind of seemed like he planned it out a little bit more. But Prince, it just kind of seemed like he was just in the middle of doing whatever weird, goofy stuff he was in the middle of doing. Then he just kind of stopped.
Living life. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And then
it's kind of, I think people kind of want that same experience immediately that they had with David Bowie. And it's like, look, not everybody, this was special because you're not going to get this every time. Not everyone knows, their time's going to be up.
Yeah, there's nothing like lucky about it, but the death of David Bowie is a really rare instance in pop music or in art in general, where someone who had so many identities throughout his life and who also took his own identity with a grain of salt could look at his own death, in the near future and react artistically to it,
Right.
Like, I think there's something really, really rare about that.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, people definitely ate that up.
Yeah. Good luck to the record labels, trying to recreate that with the death of Prince,
Exactly. Good luck.
Those are two really iconic artists to have lost this spring. It's really, really something. I mean, they both were some of those kind of pop geniuses who, on some of their albums, pretty much played every instrument. Pretty much took their musical vision from start to finish and from bottom to top, in their arrangement and their performance, and did it well.
Oh,
Played
yeah.
on such a high level. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, if you watch like some of these, the videos that have been coming out about Prince are just amazing. Like they'll show him like switching instruments within the same song, and it's like, okay, well, he's playing guitar better than anyone I've ever seen play guitar, and now he's going to go play drums better than anyone I've ever seen play drums, and now he's going to go play bass better than it's just like, okay, calm down, dude, we get it.
Yeah. we're with you here.
Yeah, exactly. You win. So, but yeah, you're right. That's been quite an experience losing both of those, and it's interesting with artists like that. You don't really, at least I didn't. Maybe other people did, but I didn't really get the full scope of what they had done until they were gone. And it seems like it's almost kind of weird. It's like we don't feel like we can give ourselves permission to really take in someone's body of work until they're gone. It's almost like, I want to start watching this TV show, but I don't know where it's going yet, so I'm just going to wait till it's over, and then I'll just binge watch the whole thing. I feel like it's almost like people are in that mode with like people's music now. It's like, let's wait till they're dead and see where this goes, and then I'll absorb it all. But it's like you could just do it now while they're alive,
Yeah, help them out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd love to hear all these wonderful tributes while they're still around to hear them.
Yeah.
So
I had some friends visiting New Orleans back in January, right around, I guess, toward the end of the month, not long after Bowie passed away, and apparently a parade went by. They just missed it. Like they were at a show, or they were eating dinner, and they stepped out and they saw a baby going by in a baby carriage with like the David Bowie lightning bolt across his face. And then they saw some other people dressed up as different eras of different personas of David Bowie. And they asked somebody, and apparently there had been a parade on a cart led by the guys from the Arcade Fire singing Bowie songs. And it was just hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people doing this parade that they put together in the course of like 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
Down in New Orleans. It would have been amazing to see it. I recommend. I have intended myself to do some more research about that and check out some videos of it. But what a cool testament! That was my thought too. Is like, damn, it would have been cool if Bowie could have seen that.
Exactly. Well, yeah, people don't feel moved to do that until they're like, oh man, no more music. It's like, well, they might like to hear that, while they're here.
Yeah. So it is.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned that you had some wild touring stories with the parade band. Did you have any queued up that you felt like sharing?
Oh, let's see. Well, I think we'll start at the very end of our last tour. Mm-hmm. We got to go down to Austin, Texas at the end of March and play at a festival called Honk, Texas. It was pretty funny. My brother called me while we were down there, and the phone connections usually aren't so good between South Korea and Indiana. And he said, well, I talked to Mom, and she said you're down in Texas at a honky tonk festival. And I said, no, Honk, Texas. It's a brass band festival. And it turns out that these honk festivals have become an international phenomenon. The first ones were started in maybe 10 or 11 years ago, I believe, in Somerville, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. By a band called the Second Line Social Aid and Pleasure Society, I think is their name. I hope I got that right. This woman, Trudy, who plays the bass drum in that band, was one of the instrumental figures in getting honk started. And it's basically a convergence of street bands and parade bands and DIY or punk brass bands from around the country, and now there are honk festivals in Seattle, Washington, Austin, Texas, Somerville, Massachusetts, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and also somewhere down in Australia. I can't remember which city. There's a character from this, I guess the band leader from this Chicago group called Environmental Encroachment, who brags about having been to 40-some honk festivals, even though it's only been around for 10 years or so. He's been to just about every single one. So anyway, there's this whole tradition that we didn't know existed until we started a parade band, and then we've met all these other wonderful people around the country who are, basically a lot of. If I was going to generalize, I'd say it's a lot of really active community members, really active active musicians and active artists, and people putting a lot of energy into local communities wherever they're at, and making a bunch of noise at rallies in some cases, making a bunch of noise at cultural festivities in other cases. It's really a diverse scene of music. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we got to play at this festival and meet a bunch of these people, some familiar faces, mm-hmm. and then met a whole lot of new people. There was even a band from Moscow that played at that festival, and they flew to the U.S. strictly, basically for that weekend, for that show, and they headed home. And wow. They were excellent. Yeah. Really excellent group. But a pretty good, juicy busking story from the last night of that tour took place in Mobile, Alabama. There was a Dr. John show at a theater down the street from a gig that we had. Mm-hmm. Dr. John, by the way, he's got to be in his 70s by now and still touring, still traveling and playing.
Nice.
He was playing at a place called the Sanger Theater, which was a block and a half from where we were playing, which was at the Merry Widow. Mm-hmm. And the guy promoting our show was the same dude promoting the Dr. John show. So when we mentioned to him that we were thinking of getting out and busking, getting out and playing on the streets before our gig to try to scare up some audience, mm-hmm. he said, "Oh, well, you should go play outside the Dr. John show by all means." He said, "Here's exactly when he's starting and exactly when he's stopping, and you can try to steal his audience, you know." Well, borrow. I guess borrow is a better word, because he would still have his audience.
Sure.
We wouldn't take them from him during the show.
Yeah, you can love more than one.
That's right. It's that kind of world these days, I tell you. So we went over and played outside the theater before his set, and people were really enjoying the music, and we were playing well. We'd been on tour for a week, so we were pretty tight, and people were dancing and getting into it and throwing some money into our hats, and we're telling them all about our gig down the street. Come see us after the Dr. John show. And then we came back and played at the end of his set and played a few songs, and then finally they opened the doors, and this whole throng of people came pouring out, and we just had them. We had an audience of music lovers who were out to have a good time, and we got them dancing again, and I didn't see it happen, but there was this old woman who had like a tasseled leather jacket and a skirt on, and her husband, who was apparently from Terre Haute. We talked a little bit to him. Mm-hmm. But in any case, she kept throwing 20s in our hat.
Wow.
Like she probably gave, and then whenever people give us that much money, we try to give them a CD, throw a little money back at them, mm-hmm. or throw a little music back at them so they can,
sure.
take us with them in that sense. And by that time, she had probably given us $60, and my bandmates saw this, although I didn't. She apparently took her pantyhose off one at a time and threw them into our hat. So at the end of the night, I was looking over at Dylan, and I was like, "Hey, what's this in the hat here?" And he said, "Well, let me tell you, Ben. This old lady who was probably pushing 60, 70 years old decided to dance her way out of her pantyhose. She liked that music so much."
Wow.
Yep.
That's something to put on your resume right there.
Yeah, that's what we figure. Just another claim to fame out there in the world.
Sweet.
Yeah, they seem to party on into the golden years down in the South. It's pretty refreshing.
For sure.
Not quite as I don't know the word for it. Things seem a little more tame as you get older in the Midwest.
Sure, definitely. Well, I heard an interesting thing. I heard an interview with David Simon, who created the TV show Treme, of course. He was saying that the reason that New Orleans was such a hub of, kind of the music that you're talking about, jazz and parade band music and all that, is that after the Spanish-American War, that's where all the soldiers got off the boats, and they had all these instruments, I guess, and they didn't want to take them home, so they just dumped them off as they were getting off the boat. And so you could get like a sousaphone or whatever flugelhorn or whatever crazy brass instruments that kind of came back from the war that nobody wanted, and that was kind of part of the genesis of why jazz and all these other unique forms of American music happened where they did. Is it just happened that all these instruments were available all of a sudden at this one place, and so in this 15 block radius, you have this entire genres of music created just out of basically more or less found objects. So pretty amazing.
There's another side. There's another side to that history that I learned about really recently, which is pretty fascinating, and it has to do with a slave revolt down in Cuba. In 1809, there were over 10,000 Saint Dominique, who are French Haitian refugees, that fled the area of a city called Santiago de Cuba. It's kind of in the southeastern. It's a southeastern coastal city in Cuba. They fled Cuba in 1809 and went directly to New Orleans. And at that time, they nearly doubled the population of New Orleans. And they wound up basically establishing thriving sugar industries in both of those in New Orleans, and then also maintaining their family ties to Cuba and developing this cultural exchange basically through the 1800s, through the early 1800s. I don't know. I mean, they say that nearly doubled the population of New Orleans, and it had to bring so much music with it. And people talk about New Orleans being the birthplace of jazz, and of course the home of these parade bands and brass bands and Dixieland and all of this. But a lot of that goes back to Cuba, goes back to Africa. One step away.
Sure.
And this was an instance with this really big influx of French Haitian people. They came and stayed. They came and set up sugar plantations and so forth in that area. And I just learned about that very recently. Apparently, there's the way I learned about it was in hearing about this. There's a high school in New Orleans called the Warren Easton Charter High School, which is, I believe, like a creative arts high school. And they're doing a 3-year exchange program with students from the Conservatorio Esteban Salas de Santiago de Cuba, where they're going to be they're going to be jazz bands or bands of some sort from both of those schools that are going to be playing in one another's hometowns over the next 3 years and teaching and studying with one another. So I got some information about about all of that because I've been curious about what it might look like to try to go to Cuba with my band someday. Or so forth, and so someone passed this info on to me, and I thought it was pretty fascinating.
Oh, wow, yeah, I'd love to go to Cuba now that the relations have changed. I've always wanted to go there. It looks really cool. So,
indeed.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit at the beginning that you had started a new music studio. When did that kind of start, and what was the genesis of that? You said you've been given, lessons for so long. Was this something you'd thought about doing for a long time?
Yeah, I've been teaching privately since I was about 17 or 18, and I've been teaching in other people's shops for the past 6 years. I taught at Rewind in downtown Bloomington for 5 years, and then I was teaching at the Block House, which is it's more of a music studio and a venue, more of a recording studio and a venue. I taught there for the past year or a little more, and the opportunity presented itself to start my own shop and take over the old Echo Park Studio B, which is out on the northwest side of Bloomington. It's a space that was made for music recording and for music in general. So it's very well equipped for recording work and for teaching work and for shows as well. So the time finally came to just break off and do my own thing. It's been really good working with these other studios over the years, and it's allowed me to become a better teacher and to hone in on how I like to approach things. And now I have 3 to 4 functional rooms in this space where I can have different people teaching. That's part of the goal with it, is to get several different musicians teaching side by side up here. Some of the people who are currently diving in to teach are Aaron Comforti and Duran Jones and Sophie Fott and Alex Arnold, and Sam Bartlett is eventually going to be joining in. He does old-time string band styles of music. A couple of those people that I mentioned are saxophonists. There'll be piano lessons and voice lessons and music theory lessons and audio recording lessons, and you name it, we'll teach it. That's kind of been the idea, is to get a bunch of really active professional Bloomington musicians together to teach, so that the students get an education that is based on based on the efforts of musicians who are really going for it around the community.
Right, definitely. How has it been kind of moving from, working in someone else's space to having your own space and kind of being a, basically a small business owner? What, advice would you have for people? I know you think Jonathan mentioned you set up an LLC, is that right?
Yeah, I set up Jefferson Street Music LLC. Okay. And that covers both the parade band and the teaching operation in my life. And I don't know. I think what I would say about it is that I guess there's nothing wrong with working in other people's facilities, and there's nothing wrong with sharing other people's space. It just comes down to whether you're compatible or not, and whether you feel like you have enough room, And for myself, there came a point where I know I could be teaching more, but there's only so many hours available at the block house, or I know I could be rounding up some more teachers, but I don't really have the time or the space for it to really make that happen. And so, I don't know, the opportunity to take over rent on this building, on the one hand, it's a little scary because it's a chunk of money going out the door every month, and there's no way around that. But it's such a huge opportunity to get to finally shape a space how I see fit, and to have a place 24/7 to put on events, to rent it out for band rehearsals, to set up recording sessions, to bring in teachers that I'm excited about working with. All that stuff is just, it's really kind of exhilarating, It's a pretty big opportunity.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things that, the whole DIY thing and kind of shaping your vision, how you would want to do it, obviously is huge. But, I used to think before I tried to start doing things for myself, it's like, oh, man, I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And, but if you think about it, if you're a small business owner, you're basically, it's like, yeah, you're the boss, but everybody that comes to you is your boss in a certain way, so it's kind of like you have all these little bosses, as opposed to, you are technically the boss, but, you're now beholden to everyone that comes through the door in a certain way. So, it isn't. Yeah,
there's a relationship there where it's got to be a lot of give and take. You got to read what people need, what people want, and what people can offer to you, and what you can offer to them, and what it's worth, and so forth. And you really got to, you just got to figure out how to keep your instincts about you and roll with it all, I suppose.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing for me, especially, when I, first wanted to, I've always wanted to be a writer and kind of put my thoughts out into the world and stuff, and that's kind of a very internal thing. But then when it comes to actually trying to make a living at it, you kind of have to be self-promoting and work against the instinct that made you want to, do this in the first place. And I'm sure there's an element of what you're doing in that as well. So, it's kind of like you have to self-promote when really all you want to do is turn inward and explore your, whatever you feel like exploring or whatever. So,
yeah, it seems like it seems like a dichotomy in people. There are a lot of people that are very good at promoting or at self-promoting, and then there are a lot of people who are very good at creative exploration, but there's not usually a lot of overlap, right? There's not usually a lot of people who are good at both. And I just think you have to make time for both. You can't do both in the same breath. They just take really different kinds of energy. But if you see in your current situation that both are important, you just have to draw some lines and say, okay, Thursday morning is promotion. Friday morning is promotion. Sunday I make art. You just have to draw some lines for yourself, and then figure out how to snap into those modes, I think.
For sure. Now, another thing that I know that you've done kind of on the DIY tip is you did, tell me if I'm wrong here, but you kind of built your own house, right, in Mitchell, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. My partner Leah and I built a small straw bale house on some family land down in Mitchell, Indiana. That's right.
How long did that take, and how many people were involved in that one?
Oh, let's see. That took a little more than a year and a half. And we built it with the help of our friends and, by hand. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of borrowed tools and a lot of hours of figuring it out and designing and asking a lot of questions and learning about things on YouTube and reading books and all kinds of good stuff.
Right. How did it turn out in the end? Did it turn out the way you wanted it to?
It did. Yeah, it's a small round straw bale house with earthen plaster walls and a nice standing seam metal roof and a nice wood cook stove inside that keeps it warm in the wintertime, and it's a really good place to live. Yeah, we're really cozy there.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we've been talking for more than an hour. I don't mean to keep you much longer here, but was there anything else we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about or promote? Where can people find you and all that?
Yeah, one band that we didn't get to, which is a current project, is called Chainsaw Mondays, and there's a musician around town named Tim Baker. He's the front man for Chainsaw Mondays. He still plays in a group called Carpenter and Clerk, which is probably where I first heard him, was with that group. And Chainsaw Mondays is a rock trio with a horn section. We have guitar, bass, and drums, and then my buddy Aaron and I actually play horns in the band. I've been learning to play the saxophone for the last 4 or 5 years here, and I play bari sax, the big one.
Oh, wow.
in that band, and Aaron plays trumpet, and it's a really excellent, unique rock band around here. We're going to be playing at the Chocolate Moose on Friday the 13th of May, and we're going to be playing Saturday the 14th of May at Big Woods Brewery and Pizzeria out in Nashville, Indiana. And that's going to be a really busy weekend because on Sunday the 15th we're having the grand opening of the Jefferson Street Music Studio.
Oh, wow.
Which will simultaneously be my student recital that'll be running from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and then also just basically a big old block party. We're inviting all the neighbors out and having some grilled out food and some beer from the BBC and some ice cream from the Chocolate Moose, and there's going to be several local bands playing, including the Jefferson Street Parade Band and Daisy Chain and Mind Parade and Peter Oren and probably one other group that is in the process of being confirmed right now.
Cool.
So that's like an all-day block party at 2051 West Vernal Pike in Bloomington, Indiana.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'll definitely share that when the episode goes up here, because, I've never been disappointed by a Ben Fowler show yet, so.
Heck yeah.
Awesome.
You can find the Parade Band on Facebook, and in the next couple of days you'll be able to find the Jefferson Street Music Studio on Facebook, and keep an eye out for what's going on. I suppose that's probably the easiest way.
All right, cool, man. Well, I would recommend anyone who's interested in taking music lessons looking it up, because, you'd be learning from the best for sure. So, well, thanks for coming on, dude. I really appreciate it.
Heck yeah, it's really good to talk to you, Rob. Have a good rest of the day up there.
Oh, for sure, man. Say hello to everybody, and hopefully I'll see you guys in concert soon. So.
Sounds good. All right.
Talk to you later, man. Bye.
Bye.